What does the Grayscale win mean for Bitcoin? Let's discuss. So hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about the news that broke today where Grayscale won their lawsuit against the SEC. And so basically what this was about was that Grayscale had last year tried to convert its trust into an ETF, its Bitcoin trust into an ETF, and the SEC had rejected that. But then Grayscale sued the SEC saying that that rejection was arbitrary and it didn't make sense given the fact the SEC had already approved Bitcoin futures ETFs. And that since the markets were so highly correlated between spot and the futures markets, why did it make sense to approve one and not the other? And basically in this decision from the court, they agreed with Grayscale. They said that the rationale that the SEC had given for that rejection did not hold up, was not strong enough to merit a rejection. And basically what the court has ordered is that there needs to be a re-evaluation of the Grayscale's application to convert its trust into an ETF. So it's important to be clear about what this means. This is not the court ordering the SEC to immediately approve the Grayscale application to convert its trust into ETF. That's not what this is. They're basically just ordering the court that their prior rejection doesn't hold up. It's rejected and they have to go back and they have to reevaluate things. And so it is still possible for the SEC to reject that application. They just have to do so for different reasons than what they already argued, because the court already said that those are not warranting of a rejection. So they had to come up with something else. Will they try to do that? Who knows? They already look kind of silly already for this loss, especially that the court kind of laid into them with this, really saying that they had no merit for their rejection and their arguments for why they rejected do not stand up. So they could try to reject it again, but it might be a little bit more difficult now, and they just set themselves up to lose again in another potential lawsuit. But what that would do is let them stall things. And so what really this might come down to is how much does the SEC hate crypto and Bitcoin ETFs? Are they willing to come up with some other BS reason for denying it? And then knowing that they're probably going to lose eventually, but stalling things, years now, even further down the line. And even short of that, even if they ultimately do accept the application or approve it, they still have time now. It's not like this is going to happen overnight. This could take quite a while before that ultimate acceptance would come out. And so this is not anything that's going to happen immediately if they do end up approving it. But it is certainly a win. This does ultimately make the likelihood of a Bitcoin ETF more likely than before. And so with the deadline for approval of other ETFs, other applications for spot Bitcoin ETFs coming up, it could be the SEC just decides that they're going to just bite the bullet, accept their losses, and just approve a whole slate of them. So they might approve Grayscale's conversion at the same time when they approve things like the BlackRock ETF, things like that. That's all speculation at this point, but it certainly is possible that kind of a thing could happen. So I just want to be clear of what it is and what it isn't. But certainly it's good news, and the market has been reacting accordingly. So as I record this on the 29th, soon after the news broke, we can see that Bitcoin is currently up a little over 5% now, trading up at about 27.4K as I record this. So certainly very bullish momentum. And so I think the question we want to ask then is, if this is some bullish move and Bitcoin doesn't just give this all up into the daily close, so the daily close here will be important, where might we expect Bitcoin to go? Where might we expect to find resistance? How high could we reasonably expect it to go? So the first thing I want to talk about, just looking at the volume profile for Bitcoin over this more recent trading range as we had gotten up into the 30K region before. What you can see based on this analysis of the volume profile, and basically what this is showing you is just how much volume for Bitcoin transacted at different price levels. And the idea would be at high levels, at places where there's a lot of volume that transacted, there are probably a lot of people who have their cost basis at that level. A lot of Bitcoin traded hands there. Reasonable to expect that some number of people still hold their Bitcoin from that level. And we can see that Bitcoin so far had bounced off of the exact level where the most Bitcoin had been trading hands in this visual range. We can see that right here. The lower part of this bar is about 27.7K, and that's indeed exactly right about where Bitcoin had put in its high, about 27.7K as I record this. And so if we're thinking about where Bitcoin might find resistance again, it needs to slice through these levels, really kind of slice back up to the top of this big red candle back here at about 28K. And then that's the next place we might expect a decent amount of resistance, is this place that acted as support for so long through here. You can really see that in the volume profile here. Then if you can clear above that, the next place you'll be looking at is around 30K. But then above that, you're getting closer to clearer skies. And that's where you actually need to zoom quite a bit further out to get a larger view of how much Bitcoin has transacted at some of these levels here to see where the next resistances might be. And we can see that the next big area where there's a decent amount that's showing up here is up actually closer to 38 to around 40K through here. And that would be people who've been holding it for quite a while who would still have their cost basis throughout those points. So that's getting a bit ahead of ourselves. First, we'd like to see it be able to clear above this 27.5-ish range here, or 27.7 range, get back up to some of these levels. But then if we can stage a breakout above, that's where we'd be looking at some of those higher levels. And these are levels that we've talked about in the past as well, that if Bitcoin's able to break above 30K, you really would be looking up closer to around 38K for that next big level of potential resistance. So it'll be interesting to watch, but that's one of the first things that we can look at. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about was some of our models and what they're making of this current setup of where Bitcoin is and where we might expect it to go. So I'm showing you here is our short-term UDPI. This is our risk model for Bitcoin, one of them. This is the short-term version that cares about moves that play out over days to weeks, so relatively short-term in its time horizon. And basically higher levels mean higher risk, lower levels mean lower risk. Or more precisely, the higher level it means that there's relatively low upside potential, relatively high downside potential. Then the lower you get to, the more that there's upside potential relative to downside potential. And so what we can see with Bitcoin's short-term UDPI is that really ever since the beginning of the year, it had been treating this -3 level as support, that it would dip down to that level, then go on a big rally, dip down to that level, go on a big rally, dip down to that level, go on a big rally, and then here we are doing it again. Now, interestingly, we've actually seen the short-term UDPI even get lower than it had any of those prior times, meaning that it is thinking that in the short term, there's more upside potential relative to downside potential now than there was here, here, or here. And notably, this is also the lowest level in the short-term UDPI that we've seen since the FTX collapse. That's the only time in going back through here that we've gotten down to that level. So it's the lowest level we've been since that point. And so what this means is that Bitcoin has a lot of room to move to the upside in the short term if it wants it. Basically, it has plenty of room to the upside, even more so than it did before these prior notable rallies to the upside we've seen since the beginning of the year. And so that's where, if we can see a strong daily close from Bitcoin and really confirmation, especially in the next couple days, that this is a rally that has legs and is something that might look more like some of these previous rallies that we've seen, that might then give us more confidence that it will be able to eat up a lot of this realistic upside potential it has. And who knows, that might actually be the rally that could break it above 30K and up to some of these higher targets that we talked about before. Still too early to be super confident about that yet. I'd like to see the daily close and how things develop. But certainly the setup is there that if Bitcoin wants to rally, it has the room to move up to those points. It's much more likely to break up to those levels now, I would argue, than it was, for example, back here up at 30K when a short-term UDPI was already getting up and relatively extended. So something I'm going to be watching closely. And the other thing I'm going to be watching closely as well in terms of how far this setup can take us to the upside is what are broader markets doing? One of the really nice things to see today in conjunction with this bullish news specific to Bitcoin is that the stock market's also trading up. That we're also seeing a nice green day in the stock market here as well across all the different indices. We're seeing that. And we're also importantly seeing the dollar start to fall, the DXY. So the DXY is the strength of the dollar relative to a basket of other fiat currencies. What we're seeing is that it is starting to fall off. It had broken above this trend line, looking like it might have been breaking out to the upside. And the reason we cared about that is that the dollar tends to be inversely correlated with risk assets. When the dollar is doing well, risk assets tend to do poorly. When the dollar is doing poorly, risk assets tend to be doing well. And crypto very much follows that type of pattern. So what I would really like to see is for this to be a false breakout of the dollar, for it to correct back down and actually continue its downtrend. And if that can happen while the stock market maybe goes and sets in a new higher high relative to the July high here, that would all be tailwinds that would create a more favorable environment for risk assets that could then go in conjunction with this bullish catalyst that we just saw with the Grayscale SEC ruling, that could then be another thing to send us higher. So I think we'll want to look at across the board of all these things. Does the broader macro environment continue to be conducive to risk assets doing well? And if so, I see no reason why this setup, this very nice setup that we're seeing on the short-term UDPI, can't play out one more time again like it has from the beginning of the year and move us higher. Time will tell, of course. We'll want to see how things resolve today, but I currently think that there's a reasonable chance this could happen, especially if we see broader markets continue to move as they are. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. And also check us out at polaritydigital.io. That's our website where we have live data from all of our different models and more.